Usually when I think of a Dell Inspiron, I think of a cheap or mid-range device that will be found on many shelves at Best Buy, that is weighed down by Norton and McAfee antivirus and is generally a good experience for all of 6 months before someone ruins it. That might be in mischaracterization, but I've just seen way too many Inspirons that fit exactly that bill. I've maybe used 20 or 30 over the years, and all of them are relatively fine devices for the price, but they really miss out on a lot of features and functionality and premium design of their more expensive XPS brethren. Which is why I was very surprised when I saw the Dell Inspiron 13-5310. I had expected it just to be kind of another face in the crowd Inspiron that I had no interest in. But then I actually got to use it for a little bit and I was very impressed. So much so that there's probably a lot of reasons why I'd choose this over a Dell XPS. Let's talk about them. This is InnoIso and this is the Dell Inspiron 5310 review. A lot of this is going to be talking about the design, which, like I said, normally XPSs have substantially better design than Inspirons. Usually that's dedicated to just how tight the tolerances are and how much metal and premium materials they use. The Inspiron 5310 is a combination of metal and plastic, but not a bad combination. The top panel is completely metal. The keyboard deck is metal as well, with the bottom panel being plastic, kind of similar to the Surface Laptop Go that I reviewed last year and absolutely loved. The panels aren't quite as tight as most XPSs, meaning that there's some gaps between the bottom and the side panel, which leaves it a little bit uncomfortable in the hands, but not enough to really scrape in and cause you cuts all the time. Frankly, if you never even touched the bottom panel, you would probably be mistaken to think that this is a fully aluminum device, and it's a good one in that. I really enjoy the overall design and premium feeling of the device. One problem I have with it is the fact that they use the top panel of the device as a sort of kickstand to lift it up, but the supposed point of that is in order to get more airflow for the bottom of the device. But it just doesn't feel super premium when you're kind of setting this on your lap and propping it up, and this part of the laptop is kind of digging into your legs. Another feature that makes this laptop feel more premium is just how small the bezels feel relative to a lot of laptops from a couple of years ago. I'm glad that Dell and other manufacturers are bringing small bezels to all of their devices. Now, notably, these bezels are plastic, so you don't have the sort of glass unibody front panel that you have on a lot of more premium devices, and you also don't have a dedicated touchscreen. Normally, I tend to like touchscreens on most of my laptops. I think it's a very, very easy input method to quickly get around or tap certain parts of the screen to touch UI elements that you don't currently have the trackpad highlighted for. So for example, if I have my laptop set up in the corner, just playing music, it's a lot easier to really quickly tap the fast forward button rather than to find where the cursor is on screen, swipe over to it, and then click. Now, granted, this device unfortunately doesn't have that feature, but there's one plus side to that, and that is the fact that the panel is significantly less glossy than most touchscreen devices. Visibility on this is great, and after using Surface devices a lot over the last couple of years, I've gotten super tired of having to stare at myself in a black mirror every single time I use the device in a relatively brightly lit room. This device doesn't have that issue. I specifically noticed this in Visual Studio Code, which frankly looks at its best when used in dark mode. This way I can still see all the font really easily, not have any problems with glare or reflections, and still have a very, very high quality 1080p panel. 1080p plus, because this is one of the first mid-range devices that I've used that actually has a taller aspect ratio than traditional 16:9. Now, in the past, I'm not really all that particular. I don't really need a 16:10 aspect ratio on most displays, but when it comes to 13.3-inch displays, having that extra tall screen real estate is a nice to have. What's also nice to have is real ports. an HDMI port and 2 USB-C ports on this side, and a dedicated USB-A port on this side with a little retention, pop-out mechanism, which is so cool. I've wanted to see this on so many devices, and ironically enough, it only seems to appear on mid-range devices where they're okay with having this little clicky panel. I would prefer something like this on a Surface Pro, for example, rather than being stuck purely with USB-C and dongle life. Now, another thing I usually get dragged down with mid-range devices on is the keyboard and trackpad experience, but thankfully this has a relatively good one. The keys are squishier than I would like. They don't really offer a whole bunch of resistance or sort of clicky tactile feedback, but they offer a lot more travel than the Galaxy Book Pro that I reviewed earlier this year. The layout is relatively standard, with most of the keys being in their correct positions, save for a dedicated power button / fingerprint combo in the top right corner. Now, I don't love having a power button or fingerprint combo up here, and I would want it elsewhere instead, but it's nice to have a fingerprint sensor. But this fingerprint sensor is significantly worse than most of the other more premium devices that I've used in the last recent few years. The trackpad isn't bad in that it offers a relatively smooth, seamless experience, and it's fast and responsive, but it does have a relatively limited amount of space that you can click down on, in that you can't click down on the top right corner, and instead you've got to click midway down the trackpad. Where this device actually really stands up well is in its specs, with an Intel Core 11370H processor, 16 gigs of RAM on this model, and I think 512 gigs of storage. 512 gigs of storage, and an NVIDIA MX450M processor. That's not going to really make a lot of difference in, high fidelity AAA games, but it will offer a substantially better gaming experience than just integrated graphics. The 11370H processor is also higher wattage and a little bit more capable than your standard U processor that you'd expect in most devices, meaning that using this device is pretty incredible for just about anything. Obviously, it's not going to be the best for, high-end video editing at 4K, but it's going to be relatively competent in most scenarios other than that. Now, in terms of the fan noise, which is obviously a big concern for a lot of people, it came on pretty frequently, but it wasn't too loud. It was more of a whirring sound that wasn't too annoying, especially if I was wearing headphones. But if you are particularly sensitive to fan noise, know that you're going to get some here. All in all, what differentiates a laptop for me is the general overall experience of using the device, which is hard to describe over a video, and it's hard to put in any sort of specs. And the experience for me with this was very, very positive, which is an incredible break from just about any sort of Inspiron that I've used before. This is not only one of my favorite Inspirons that I've ever used, it's not only one of my favorite mid-range devices that I've used, it's one of my favorite laptops that I've used in the last 2 years, which is really saying something considering it's a relatively reasonable price point compared to the Surface Laptop Studio that I'm about to review. That's awesome, and it's the same experience that I got with the Surface Laptop Go last year. I love the idea of manufacturers being able to create really compelling experiences that most people can access. Now, obviously, at this spec, with this spec sheet, it's still going to be north of $1,000 at MSRP, but if you want still a great laptop that has great specs, then this is a good option. And I wouldn't mind trading down for a Core i5 and maybe integrated graphics to get a great laptop under $1,000. That would be a great recommendation for anyone I know. Thank you for watching InnoIso. I hope you liked this quick review of the Inspiron 135310G. If you did, be sure to let me know down in the comments. Check out other videos that we have on the channel, and I will catch you in the next one. Thanks.